Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe.
And in today's episode, we're going to talk about a little bit what goes on behind the scenes of running sewing businesses and talk about some updates. Perhaps we have some fun news. Maybe we run into some struggles. All that good stuff that comes with running your own business. So, Malena, since we last made an update, what's been going on in your business life?
Well, I feel like a broken record. I'm just going to repeat myself. I'm doing freelance work at the moment. So, yeah, not so much is happening with my own business. I don't have I don't unfortunately have time to do so much with my own stuff. At the moment, yesterday and today, I had 2 days in between 2 projects. So now I'm like trying to, get so much things done, and we also had a client meeting yesterday with like trying to squeeze in some more freelance work in between the other freelance work. So yeah, super busy, but I feel like I have nothing to talk about.
Yeah, but a couple of things has happened, right? And we just before we started recorded, you shared with me that you have done an update to the Malva pattern that you probably have been able to release now that when people are listening to this podcast.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm working the technical things now with the newsletter, so the link and everything should be working. I made a projector file of Malva Tee, so that's really exciting. Since I don't have a projector myself, I haven't been able to test it. So if anyone do try it and see that something is not working properly, please send feedback to me, because yeah, I've done it according to how people recommend doing a projector file. So fingers crossed, everything is correct. But I mean, since I'm not able to test it myself. But it should be able to, if I get everything technical with the newsletter, you should be able to get it when you sign up for my newsletter, and the old link should be working as well. Again, fingers crossed. but yeah, so that's at least something. It has been done for like a couple of weeks, but it's just that getting it uploaded to the correct place so people can download it. It's just that last thing that I haven't been able to do. But otherwise, it should be done.
Yeah, it's
so
so fun to
at
hear
least something.
Yeah, and it's a big step forward, because if you're loyal listeners, we did an episode a while back where we discussed the option of projector files, and you, Malena, shared some really interesting statistics about how many people that was part of a Facebook group. I think we butched the number a little bit. We inflated the number a little bit.
Exaggerated a little bit. I said 90,000, but apparently it's 70,000, which is still a lot.
A lot of people that are in a Facebook group for using projector files. So I think we both, when you mentioned that number, we had a realization that we kind of had to get on that train. And I think we both felt a little bit unsure. I guess a little bit, every time we need to learn something new, it's a little bit daunting, right? Because you don't understand. When you say projector files, you get this kind of technical idea. And perhaps we should explain what a projector file is, because honestly, when we got this explained to us, I wasn't 100% knowledgeable about this, right? But a projector file is when you use a regular movie projector, and using a specially formatted PDF file, you're able to project the pattern pieces onto the fabric on the cutting table, which means that there is no paper involved, and the only thing you need to ensure is obviously that the measurements are 1-to-1, and there's no angle, so it's nothing distorted. And by doing that, I mean, to me, I realize this is a revolution, a total game changer that could minimize a lot of the hassle, especially if you're, hobby sewist and you have to tape together small sheets of paper like an A4 and letter, and now you would be able to, without any waste, just project the files, and it's easy to move around. So I think we both had this realization that this is kind of a big thing, but neither of us has a projector, so So I'm very excited now because Malena, you're a real trailblazer here among us, because you have actually now done a projector file for your first projector file for one of your patterns. So I feel this is really exciting, and if you are a projector user or considering becoming one, I think we would love to hear from you. Either drop us a comment on Stitching Tales Pod on YouTube or Stitching Tales Pod on Instagram, because we really want to learn more about this, and when I learn more about it, I realize that maybe getting a cheap projector would actually be a worthwhile investment for myself as well, right? It seemed pretty brilliant, didn't it?
Yeah, so convenient, and to be able to, for example, at the moment, the freelance work that I'm doing right now is that I have a garment from a client, and I need to make like a proper pattern for it so she can send it out to suppliers. And imagine if having a projector file, then you'd need to measure and retrace to the program. But then now I had to print out the paper, place it on top of the top, to see is everything correct. I could just have it projectored instead on the top and see like, does the line align or not. So yeah, it would be so convenient to actually have it, like it would be so much quicker, and to skip that step with printing out the paper, cutting everything out. So it sounds really very convenient.
Yeah, so I also realized that now for my next pattern I definitely need to get my projector file as well. And how long did it take you to format it, so we get an idea of how difficult it was?
Yeah, since you already have the pattern in Illustrator, you can use different drawing programs, I guess. But it was just making the front piece and back piece double, so it's like not on the fold anymore. I made all the lines just black and a little bit thicker, so they are more visible when you are projecting it to a fabric. Added on a grid, 1x1 grid on like the whole surface basically. I have that layered closed, so it's not visible when you open it up, but you can open it, so it's really easy, a lot easier than to calibrate and to make sure that it's projected, like the size is correct. And just place the pattern pieces a little bit, have some distance in between each other, so it's a little bit easier when you place them, and have the grain line at the same direction. Half an hour work to get it done, so not at all complicated. And to get the grid, it was just Google it, how to get a 1x1 grid on all the whole artwork, and great tutorials. You will see great tutorials about how to do it very easily. So yeah, it was easy.
Wow, that I can't even believe when you said it took half an hour. But the grid you say 1x1, is that in centimeters or is it
inch?
Inch,
I did
right.
1x1 inch grid. If I understand it correctly, like most cutting mats have 1x1 inch grid. I also have a square where it's like 5x5 centimeters, so you will be able to check that as well. But yeah, I used inch grid this time. Also interesting to know what you guys prefer if you're using a projector file. Does it matter if it's inch or do you want centimeters for the grid that is like all over the surface? That would be good to know.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And I guess you could add 2 different grids as separate PDF layers, right? So you could theoretically also have a metric grid. So for instance, regarding the cutting mat, I have a cutting mat and it's 2-sided, just like the measuring tape that we talked about in a previous episode about sewing tools, that on one side I have inches and on the other side I have centimeters. So obviously, because we do the metric system, I don't use the inch. But on the other hand, where we also, a lot of, at least my customers come from the US. And also, by the way, interesting statistic about this podcast, almost 40% of our listeners are situated in the US. We really thought it was amazing and really interesting and fun, especially, because we don't live in the US, we live in Sweden. And so we thought that was really interesting and exciting to see that so many listeners are, from other parts of the world. So we definitely try to be mindful of that as well when we talk about the metric and the imperial system. And I always try to do like really quick calculations in my head. So when we say 1 centimeter, so what that means so I guess it also depends on your market, right? I mean, if the dominating market is wanting to have the imperial system, it makes sense. But I kind of find the idea appealing of having 2 layers grid, so you can switch a metric and an imperial. I think that's
a really good idea. I will do that next time. I will do that.
Next time?
Now it's done.
Yeah.
Now I just, when you're done, it's like, I can't redo it right now. I just need to get that out. Next pattern, I'll make sure to do it. But are you, for your next pattern, the trouser that you're working on, are you going to have a projector file on that one?
Absolutely. I have not done anything regarding that yet, but before I send it out, it's definitely going to be a projector file. So if long-time listeners have... I think sometimes for both of us, I feel that Malena's always moving at lightning speed when she's doing stuff. But I keep talking about some major projects, and one of those projects is to release my next sewing pattern, because it's actually 2 years, over 2 years since I last released a sewing pattern, which is way too long. But there's a reason for that, of course, especially because we work so hard on the book Fit for Knit. So as we always remember, you can't do too many things at once, because when you're running a small business. But yeah, I have done a lot of progress on these pattern, because I've formatted all the PDF files and all the sizing. I have done all the illustrations for the instructions. The instructions are pretty much done. There are a few sections left. But I think I will do that in a couple of days if I just can find the time, right? And then I'm going to sew samples and take photos, and the pattern is going to be released in September. So yeah, it's a long leadway, but I love the idea of having something done and then just having it sit there in a way, because it feels sometimes because it's so stressful in a way to release a pattern, because you have to make sure all the files are in order and everything is like proofread and corrected. And I really like the idea of now being done hopefully before June is over, and then I have a couple of months just sitting on the pattern, just going back with fresh eyes and check everything without having to doing everything last minute, because I always feel that's like a recipe of having some type of technical issue, or a download link is wrong or whatever. So that's really, really good. That's why I'm pushing it, even though I don't have to release the pattern in 3 months. So and I feel really good about the pattern as well. So hopefully more people than I will like the pattern. It's a dressier pants made of knit fabric, so it's a little bit of a different approach to trousers, but it's also pretty strong trend right now to make patterns in heavier stretchy knits. It's actually quite common, at least here in Sweden, and I've also seen a couple of like bigger fashion brands doing something similar. So hopefully I will be able to time it reasonably with at least some type of trend. But you never know. It's always, you never know. You can work for months and months on a sewing pattern, and you have no idea if it's going to be a very lukewarm reception or if it's going to be a hit. You never know. So you just have to keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah, but I guess, just timing-wise, I guess it's a lot better to do it towards the fall or like after the summer holidays, because everyone is on holiday in the summer, or most people, and that's maybe not the best time to launch something. And also, since it's a trouser, it's a full leg, like long leg, warm weather, not the best combination then. So I think it's perfect to do it later after the summer. And also what you said about having it resting, it's amazing how much, if you just like step away from it for a couple of weeks and then you look at it again, it's like, how did I not see these spelling errors? Or how did I not notice this one? It's so obvious. It's amazing. Like when you sleep on it a couple of nights, like new things that you see with fresh eyes. It's a little bit scary sometimes what you notice.
Yeah, it is. You're like, because you always feel like, how could I have missed that? It's such a glaring
And if I missed
error.
that, what else have I missed?
Yeah, and that can be almost anxiety-inducing. You get a lot of flutters in your stomach because, at least that's a good thing when we're doing digital files. It's a very easy thing to do an update. I mean, I have never worked with print sewing pattern, but I've sometimes thought about that because occasionally it does happen that you see sewing pattern companies having some type of error and they have to do like an errata or send out a PDF file with something corrected. And I can only imagine, as a fellow business owner, the kind of anxiety that they are suffering. I think it's such a mentally, devastating situation. I mean, I would be curled up on the floor, basically hyperventilating if something like that happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's also one of the reasons why I love PDF pattern, because you don't have to invest in a stock, and it's like so easy to do corrections if needed and just send out a new PDF version of it. So yeah, I applaud those who have physical paper patterns. It's a very, very brave thing to do.
Yeah, and I'm not sure because I don't really keep on top of everything right now, but I guess we will see more and more sewing pattern companies doing print to order basically on the print side and then focusing mainly on the digital side. I know I've seen a couple of pattern companies doing a really clear switch, and it makes sense because just the stock. I mean, there are minimum print runs, for instance. And if you print very few patterns, it's going to be really expensive. So you will be tempted to maybe print a run of 1,000 sewing patterns. And just for full disclosure, I've never sold 1,000 of any of my sewing patterns. Now, of course, these are bigger brands that are doing this. Of course, they sell out. But at least, I think, to be honest, I think for most sewing pattern companies in the indie space, selling 1,000 copies of one print pattern, that's a really big number. Just to give you an idea as a listener on the kind of volumes that we are shifting, because most of us are lucky to sell a couple of hundreds of one sewing pattern, honestly.
Yeah, it's for me at this moment it wouldn't make sense at all to focus on like a physical paper pattern. Such I sell at such small numbers. I do have a big printer like standing right next to me. It's like 60 centimeters wide. I don't know what that's in inches, but it's like it's kind of big, but it's not that big that you can print out, especially your trousers, the biggest sizes. So that's I'm a little bit like. Why didn't I, when I bought this printer or plotter, why didn't I go for the wider one so I would actually have the possibility to print on demand as well. But now, since it's not big enough, I can't really do that. So it's a little bit annoying.
Yeah. Yes, I think a lot of actually smaller sewing pattern companies are switching to that model that they get an order and they print it out and they fold it up and then they ship it. So they do really based on demand. Of course, paper and ink cost a fair bit too, but at least then you won't be stuck with the storage space. I also have, I think I'm going to do quick, maybe it's like 12 inches wide or something like that. 20, no, let me see, 12, 20, sometimes I'm so quick with the math, but I think it's it will be 22 inches or something like that. Will be, and the full size I think is 90 centimeters, right? Or something like that, the one, and I don't have that either, so it definitely is a limiting factor. And again, I could see if I would ever do a trade fair, like a sewing fair, in-person sewing, I could definitely see myself doing a limited print run just to have people to buy something if I was in a stall, just apart from my physical books, that I could see. But I feel also one of the things, because I always get a lot of questions regarding the fact that I don't ship my own physical print books. So if you get over to my shop at thelastage.com, there will always only be digital ebooks, because the realities of living in Sweden is that most of my customers are outside Sweden. Shipping is extremely expensive, and then add to that custom fees and custom and taxes. And then you can get it on Amazon if you're living in the US for like $0 shipping, like the next day. And it could take a week for me to ship it to Sweden. From Sweden, and I will end up eating so much of the shipping cost. So that's a reason why it's impossible. I mean, you live in a small country like Sweden. It's very, very difficult to get a profit when it comes to shipping stuff. So, for instance, my physical books are partly in a distributor in the UK, and also I have a Swedish distributor as well as serving the Northern Europe. But that Swedish distributor sells like less than 1/10 of all the copies that I sell every month. So it's a massive difference. So that's a little bit behind the scenes, I guess, why it's so hard to offer physical products when you're living in a small country like Sweden with not a huge sewing audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much more convenient to, how do you say, delegate that task of shipping and sending it. If you would have to do it yourself, I mean, you will also just work part-time with this at the moment, so you're not in your office every single day. And then if you get an order, you can't send it for a couple of days even. So yeah, it would just be one of those logistic stress so nice to not have to deal with, to be honest.
Yeah. I think also when you start out, you might feel really ambitious. You want to do everything. So I can totally see why a lot of small indie sewing companies want to deal with physical products. And then when they realize of not just how expensive it is, it also takes up so much working time. And time is money, as we know. If I were to spend an hour going back and front to the post office every day, that would also mean that's the hourly payment to me as well that you have to add, and all the shipping material and everything. So it's really, really hard to get it. So I don't know the numbers, but we do have a few companies here in Northern Europe that do ship physical sewing patterns and use distributors. So I'm always like, how much? What do you call it? Not revenue, like the markup. I mean, how when you factor in all the things like the printing, the distribution, and the work time, I mean, how much money do you even make on? Even though I guess I understand totally where people can be like, wow, why do a pattern cost like? I guess a print pattern could cost up to $25 if you order it from, say, Sweden. You might think that that's an insane amount of money, but I am unsure if you're making that much money on those $25, to be honest, with the shipping and everything. So it's.
Yeah, and I've seen a few companies as well having that service now instead, that they print on demand other brands' pattern, which I think is a great service, because then they can focus on that and have more, since that's their main goal and focus, then they can really like do it more efficient with the logistics and everything. So if you found a PDF pattern, then maybe it's more convenient to ask those companies to print them out for a fee, of course. And also, I mean, most PDF patterns today have copy shop size A0 size pattern, so you can basically go to any print store and have it printed out. So there are workarounds since if you just want to have the digital patterns, that other, fingers crossed, with other services, that the customer still will be happy with the product. That's a very good point. And now, because we mentioned projector files in the beginning of this episode, that will solve all these issues, right? You just have to get a projector. Exactly.
It's the future.
I've seen a couple of posts though in the Facebook group, like, how do I calibrate my projector? And I was like, ooh, yeah. So I can provide the file. Don't ask me questions about the projector. I have no idea. I'm completely clueless when it comes to those questions. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I guess that kind of like undermines certain, because at least we know how to like get the printing right when it comes to paper, because that's something we do ourselves. But yeah, if you're watching the video version of this episode, if you can see behind me, I'm doing this recording in my studio, not in my home, and we have really high ceilings and it's quite airy. So, and behind me, I'm just going to move around a little bit here. You might be able to see the cutting board. So I think for me, it would be actually quite easy to set up a projector in the ceiling and have it project over the cutting board. So, and also from my understanding, you don't have to invest a ton of money getting the projector. So I might do that, but then there are always so many other business investments, but I guess could save so much paper. Maybe we could break even eventually. But yeah, I guess also, I think one of the things, just what you said about, configuring, because I know it's going to take so many hours and I'm going to be so frustrated. I'm going to search all over the internet to try to figure out the answers. And, that kind of stuff, every time you get something new, right? It's such an unpleasant experience before you figure everything out. So I guess to me, that's probably the thing I'm most scared about. I don't want to go through this with another technical equipment.
Yeah, and we know how sensitive printers and plotters are, so it's like, oof. We don't want to... I have no idea. I've never tried a projector file. Maybe they are a lot easier to work with. I don't know. But again, if the Facebook group had over 70,000 people in it, they can't all be wrong. So no. Maybe it's a more convenient way.
Or maybe only 10 have a projector and the rest of the 70,000 are crying for help.
Yeah, could be.
the only like 10% get it up and working, and the rest is just using its support forum. Because that's more a sign, that, because oftentimes when you join a group, you basically are looking for help from people who have similar experience. So I guess it's maybe the fact that it's 70,000, it's actually an alarming number.
Yeah, it would be interesting to do a poll, like how many of you have actually had it worked fine within 3 minutes, and how many of you are pulling your hair out and not getting it calibrated.
Yeah, so that's again why we really, really would love to hear from you. So drop us a note on our Instagram account or our YouTube account, Stitching Tales Pod, because it will be really, really interesting. I think it's so helpful if people are... I mean, I'm sure we are not the only one that are kind of hesitant about getting this stuff, and you pay a lot of money and then you're like, or then it just stay in the box until you have the time,
Yeah, so true. Ooh, speaking of, pod, I also have some great news, or like very happy news. Our book, Fit for Knit, got mentioned in the Love to Sew podcast. And they had an episode about... they wanted sewists to write in and write about their brag moments. And I was like, well, I wrote or co-wrote a book. I need to brag about that one. So I actually wrote to them, and they read my letter. And I was so happy when they did that. You know when you get a little bit teary eyes. I was like, oh my god, I'm having a moment here.
Yeah, we need to link to that episode, and I think you're underselling it a bit, as you often do, Malena, because I was actually a really, really, really moving, a very strong story, and how everything was kind of intertwined with the Love to Sew podcast, how you discovered the world of indie sewing pattern companies and PDF patterns, and how you began to listen to Love to Sew, to learn more about the sewing community, and of course then how you ended up
meeting you.
Meeting you, right? Because even though we're both in Sweden, we don't all know each other. We are actually around 10 millions in this country. That's how you got into contact with me, and that's how we ended up being friends and colleagues and writing the book together and collaborating on a ton of stuff. And so I was so touched. And I also, when they read your letter, I also started crying because it was such an emotional experience to hear your words. It was so well written and very touching. And I just also, they said some really beautiful things as well, the podcast hosts, Carolyn and Helen. And so I think you should definitely listen to there were also really beautiful stories, but I felt extremely touched by hearing you sharing that your story on their podcast.
Yeah, and I mean they are they are so sweet. And if I can have a little bit more fangirl moment here, I really like. I said in a letter that I basically use their show notes as research material because, I mean, since I work as a pattern maker, I didn't sew like by myself anymore. So the whole PDF pattern world sewing community, it was completely new for me. I had no idea what it was like. So I used the show notes as research material. And since I didn't know anything about it, I was like, yeah, okay, so I found this 1 or 2 other PDF companies. Ooh, there are some competition out there. And my husband was like, yeah, but you're always going to have some competitors. Like, that's just how it is. It's like, okay, fine, yeah. But then, of course, through Love to Sew podcast, I found the fold line. Oh my god, my sweet summer child. Did I think I had like a little bit of competition when I found like a couple of other brands that did PDF patterns? When I scrolled through the fold lines, I mean list of designers, pattern designers, that list was endless. I mean, I was shocked to see how many other people are actually doing PDF patterns. And I was like, okay, what's the point? What's the point in me making more PDF patterns? The market's saturated. It's full. Like, there's not room for anyone else. Like, it's done. I missed the train. It's too late. But then a couple of episodes later in Love to Sew podcast, I don't remember exactly which episode this was or what the topic was or what we were talking about. Again, it's like 5 years ago. But they actually, I think they were talking about how it is to start a sewing business, making PDF patterns. And they were so sweet in that episode. And I was like, yeah, but there's room for everyone and you can do it. And we were like really encouraging. And I was like, they are speaking to me. You know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to try. So I was this close to actually never even start to make PDF patterns, but because of that episode by them, I did it anyway. So yeah, I'm not exaggerating when I say like I have so much to thank for the Love to Sew podcast. I I really do.
Yeah, it would actually, honestly, now we're gonna dream, but it was so fun actually to do like a podcast with them at some point, because we have such a different experience in one way, but also very similar experience, especially forging a friendship through sewing, but on different continents. And I find they are such sweet people, and they've done an amazing job with their podcast, and it's no wonder that it's the biggest sewing podcast, because it definitely deserves to be, with all the labor that they put into it and all the quality of the stuff that they put out. So yeah, I would love to do something like that someday. We can, Helen, Caroline, you got our email addresses. Yeah, because it would be so fun to just a conversation about all the kind of stuff that we are talking about here, behind the scenes, and And you know,
and do you remember
also,
which? Because you were on that podcast, they
Yes.
interviewed you. Do you remember which episode it was? Otherwise, we will obviously link it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, so it was an episode, I think one of the earliest episodes, so I think it wasn't even in, maybe they have done a 20 episode, because I contacted them and basically pitched myself when I was did my first book, Sewing Activewear, and it also had a good, it coincided with Helen releasing a leggings sewing pattern, so we ended up talking a lot about that, and yeah, they were really interesting. It was a wonderful chat and really good interviewers as well. So, and that was many years ago. I think it was maybe 2018, I guess. Because
it must have been like 5 years ago, because I started my business about 6 years ago, and yeah, during the first year, I think I started to discover things.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting way, because also they do something similar as us also, you know, they don't just talk about sewing, they also share some of the behind the scenes stuff, you know, because they're not just content creators, they also run sewing businesses and all the things that entails as well. So yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone has listened to this podcast have heard about Love to Sew, because it's like the sewing podcast.
It's the podcast.
Yeah. So I don't think we have to sell it to you listeners, but we definitely gonna link
everybody
up the
knows.
episode. Yeah. And speaking of sewing patterns, you know, you bring up a good point there, because I think everyone will go through these times when it comes to sewing pattern, because the market, there are a lot of different companies, and we have also seen, for instance, I know that the Fall line, they kind of curated their, and they how should I say, they you know, they streamlined their offering, because they had so many different sewing pattern companies, so they decided to streamline and maybe not represent and sell as many sewing pattern companies, just to make their business model work. And we've also seen lately, you know, some people taking a break or closing down, and we also saw that I think the biggest French sewing company, now I can't remember. D&O. They actually decided to retire and sell their business to Closet Core Patterns. So there's still a separate pattern collection, but they are now owned, and they decided basically to retire from the industry. And I'm going to make sure to link to that. They did a blog post, or actually a couple of blog posts. One which kind of was a precursor to them closing, which was, you know, the toll of being a small company and trying to navigate everything that goes into running a business with, you know, your own personal struggles and mental health and other type of limitations. And I think that that situation ultimately led them to realize that maybe, you know, we need to step away, because, you know, we worked so hard for so many years, and, you know, sometimes, you know, the tank just can't be refilled anymore. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective, so which we have been very transparent about as well. It's hard, it's a lot of work, and most don't really make a lot of money. So I think that was a really, I think we will keep seeing, just like any sewing business, you know, there was like a gold rush for a little bit, and I think that was inflated by the pandemic, when a lot of people were discovering or rediscovering hobbies. But I think now we're definitely going to see some type of correction, you know, we're going to see some, it's just the way the business goes. I mean, it doesn't have to mean anything bad, because we are people, and sometimes, you know, it makes sense to go off and do something else. You don't, nobody's telling you just because you started a sewing company that you have to run that sewing company until you die. It's just, you know, just like we switch jobs. I mean, life change, and your priorities change as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And this is also the reason why whenever I get freelance work, I always say yes to it, because I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket and to just focus on making my own patterns. I want to spread out a little bit more. So if one thing is not working, then I can focus on the other one, and vice versa. So yeah, that's I always have that in back on my mind. Like, this is working now, but how would it work in the future? And make sure that I have like a personal financial margin, so I will be able to survive even if it's not, the one thing is not going as well. Then I can focus. Yeah, I can shift focus quite easily. But yeah, it's it's a little bit discouraging. No, what do you say? Like when you hear
discouraging.
Yeah, when companies like there and those like, no, we want to change, we want to shift gear, and it's like, if they don't, how am I supposed to do it? But again, I mean, there can be so many reasons why they, and as you say, how many people have the exact same jobs for 5 years straight? You change, you shift, you pivot, things happen. So, I mean, of course, it's the same thing when you have your own business as well.
Yeah. And it's also, you have to push yourself so hard for many years, and eventually, the burnout will creep up to you. And I think it's also, when you run a business, that it's also tied to your interests. Because one of the things they shared in one of the posts that was leading up to them deciding to exit the business was that they had no energy and time to sew for themselves. So, because they started also being quite active sewing bloggers, but at the end of the day, they were always, caught up in all the business stuff, and they felt maybe that the energy and the creativity was kind of like dampened by the fact that they had to run a business with a lot of mounting pressures, which they also address in that, both from a business perspective, but also from their personal lives. And so it's very understanding when you really think about it, that you have to make these kind of decisions. I guess it was definitely, I'm sure it was it was a complicated, I mean, it wasn't just like a simple decision for them. I think they probably are also mourning the business and, all the years that they invested in it, but they're also probably, hopefully, a bit relieved now that they can focus on other things and perhaps maybe return to sewing as a passion project rather than something you have to do, sweating out samples because you have to push out this many patterns a year.
Yeah, and as soon as money gets involved, it kind of loses your own passion. That's why I'm a passionate gardener nowadays. Like gardening is my passion, and I have been thinking like for the last couple of years, like if I would change occupation, like should I become a gardener on a professional basis? Because that's something that I really, really love at the moment. But no, I'm going to keep it as a passion, because I've worked with my hobby, or I do work with my hobby as it is today. And I know the downside it could have as well, that you need to have an income based on that. So no, gardening is going to be my passion project. I'm not gonna become a gardener or anything. So that can stay a passion. I just be joyful,
Yeah.
So yeah, not. I'm gonna stick to this one, this occupation for a while at least.
Yeah, that's a very wise thing. I think it could be easy, especially if you are like a driven person with a lot of ideas. You can always think, especially today now with social media, and you can basically, you get this idea you can do content about everything. I mean, that's a big switch. I mean, I guess we've all said to other people, and people have said to us, oh, you should start an Instagram account about this or that. If you're into baking, you should start an Instagram account about this and that. But of course, every time you do that, or, you're doing gardening, or you have a balcony that you grow stuff on, I think we're so coded these days to think that everything should become content. But that's also a killer of joy when it becomes a work. So I think you've done a really wise. You're always so wise, Malena. I wish I was the same, because I'm definitely one. I'm definitely one registrating. not so much anymore, but I've had those periods in my life when I try to think about. I have so many things I could do content about. Fitness, for instance, which I'm very invested in personally. But I don't ever do any content about that, regard from sewing activewear. But I never post any workouts on any social media or anything like that, even though that's probably the thing I spend the most time on as a hobby.
Yeah, but that's a wise thing to do. That keep those things separate. That there's nothing must or anything that you have to do when it comes to working out. That is just your pure joy. You can do whatever you want with that time and however you feel like it that day. Is nothing like, yeah, it can just be joyful. I think everyone has to have that outside of their work, like something that you can completely just like lose track of time, do whatever you want. Like it's really such important thing to recover and to rest your brain from thinking about work.
Yeah.
But speaking of work, what do you have in your pipeline now? Do you have any exciting things? How's it going with the video? Or is it is it exciting or not? What are the feelings?
Yes, it's never exciting because a long time listeners to the podcast also know there's like two running themes, Johanna themes. So one is my next sewing pattern, which is at least finally happening something. And the other one is my next sewing course, which will be about sewing jeans. And there's no more room for moving it forward. So in 2 weeks' time, when I go on vacation, in quotation marks, and for my day job, and I'm going to spend 2 weeks basically holed up in the studio filming how to sew jeans from scratch. So I'm going to do all the filming in 2 weeks, hopefully a little bit less than that. And it's going to be an absolutely terrible experience. There's no way. I have to think. It's like when you have to do like business decisions, where you have to, how shall I say, you have to get through some type of unpleasantness in order to achieve rewards that are very desirable. So I did a course, Cover Stitch Success, a cover stitch course, a shorter course, about 2 years ago. And it's been, apart from the books, it's been one of my most revenue profit. It's been one of my most profitable product. There's too many P's there. I'm stumbling. And that's just a small course at a lower price point. And so, and I know because I have a strong presence when it comes to sewing jeans, and I have my books, and it's available in 3 languages. So obviously, it's a no-brainer. Just like hopefully one day releasing a pair of jeans sewing pattern. It's just something I have to do. If I want to get my business forward, I need to do this. And I think, but that's just basically what everything is a problem for me in that sense, that I still am financially in a situation where I have to do pretty much everything myself with just a little bit help here and there, which means that it just becomes so exhausting. And so that's one of the struggles. But I know that because I managed to the other course, I managed to film it and I managed to edit it and I uploaded it to a course platform. And I mean, I know this content, sewing jeans, by heart, so I won't have any problems, teaching it. And I'm a proficient filmer, and I've done lots of jeans tutorials on my YouTube channel. So I know that I will be able to do a really good product, but it's just that it will be so exhausting. And, speaking of the balance between, because I have to do this on my vacation when you're supposed to take a holiday from your day job, but as a business owner, and I have to think at the big picture and, trying to bring up my revenue streams, getting more revenue streams, and, just taking myself and my company to the next level. This is something I have to do. So there's no thing that this will happen. It's just that I'm telling you the realities of it, that it's something that I dread doing, but I have to do it just for the reward that will come at the end of the tunnel. So that's kind of like a mental thing that I sometimes struggle with, that it's just with the book project and everything. I mean, the book, it took us 2 years. It's a long time. You have to be really focus on the end goal, basically, and sometimes go through periods when, you're less motivated, just because that at the end it was a good decision to do this.
Yeah, and since you have done it already, like you have done every single step from start to finish, you know what you are doing. I think it will go a lot better than you anticipate. I think it will run more smoother, just because you have the bar of like so high now of like, oh, this is gonna be so much work. But you know everything. It's just doing it now. You know all the steps. Like I have so much faith in that. That is gonna it's gonna run quite smoothly at the end of the day. Like yes, it's gonna be exhausting those days, but then you can also like don't push yourself to work at 10 o'clock in the evening. Like go home at a decent hour. Maybe it will take a couple of extra days. Fine, that's no problem. Rather that than you get so exhausted from these 2 weeks, and then you will have 1 year until you start editing those films. You know why I'm saying that?
Yes, yes. Well, it says that for a reason, because as I mentioned previously, when I did my cover course, I filmed it, and about 12 months later, I edited it and released the course. So that's and that wasn't helpful. Sitting on it for a year, that was not helpful.
No, but then you forget everything. Like you know what? Like it's do it in a good pace, and it will be done quicker, I would say. And maybe have like chocolate and a little bit of glass of champagne spread out in your office, so you can, like have a little treat whenever you have done something, like finished some filming. Just a hint.
Yeah, thank you.
Go get your nail dance before you start filming, so you can pamper yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I think I love that you're so encouraging. I think that's exactly what I need now. Speaking of nails, that's what I'm going to do, because just like I did with my cover stitch course, because you have to have continuity, right? So I'm going to get my nails done in navy and with this gel stuff that, will stay on for several weeks, not just the stuff you do at home. So yeah, I'm definitely going to get a professional manicure.
Can't you do like a small arrow or something on your index finger so you can like point things? You're going to be clever about this now.
Yeah, I'm going to see what the nail technician can sort out for me. That's a great idea. But yeah, it means so much, and I just hope you're right. And I think what you say sounds very encouraging, and I hope and think you're right. It's also that's with a lot of stuff that I kind of built up this like, oh, it's going to be so hard, and then of course it is never that hard, because once you get going, things will move forward.
Once you get in that flow, it's like that flow, then that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, so we will keep you updated if Johanna is absent without leave, or was that abbreviation you have in English. Then if Malena's hosting the podcast herself for a couple of weeks, then maybe you should worry, but hopefully I will be able to get back on track after that experience. But yeah. Well, I think, have we addressed a lot of stuff? We covered a lot of topics as always, but hopefully as you as a listener got an idea at least on the stuff that's going on, and we will of course, as I mentioned previously, link to all the stuff that we mentioned, because I think it's a lot of really interesting content, and again, we would love to hear your experience about using Projector for cutting fabrics, which we are possibly, maybe someday also doing ourselves. Who knows? Stay tuned.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe. Bye bye.
Bye bye.